So hopefully you've repaired whatever you needed to repair, and now you're ready to put the phone back together. So the biggest thing when you're putting the board into the phone or on the frame is that you want to make sure all your little cables are out of the way. You don't want to set the board on top of these cables and then you can actually crease them. So just gently bend them back. You don't want to crease the cables because if you crease it, then you'll damage it. And what may be easier, depending if you've got the speaker flex cable in or not, is you can actually put that in after the fact. It may be easier that we can just add that in once we have the board in. So make sure your camera is back, these two cables are back, and that everything is in how it should be. And then I'll just hold the board down here and make sure that the camera itself, that camera, clears and gets into this frame. Kind of how we were cautious about when we pulled it out. We want to be cautious about putting it in. So we'll kind of line it up on top, make sure the camera's in place, and then make sure all the cables are out of the way before we push anything down to clip it in. And then remember, we have that one clip right down here, and that once you get it, it should just kind of click in place, and it'll be good to go. Now we have the one screw that we'll put in, and I'll show you here. You might notice that what I'll do is I'll use my finger and I'll pinch the screw down, so I don't have to set the phone down and then grab it and do that. I just kind of use my finger, pitch it into place, and then when I go to put the screw in, I'll use my thumb, usually my thumb, as a guide. So I can lay the screwdriver right on my thumb and slide it right in, and it just makes it a whole lot easier to put everything back together. So we'll just start to replug everything in place. I use my fingers. You just kind of get a feel for it. You'll be able to look at the cable and then line it up and just kind of wiggle it, and it should go. And then we have, you don't want to push too hard, that if it's not lined up properly and then you push it in, you can actually damage the plug. And then here's the antenna cable, and this one will line up. These ones are a little harder because they're smaller, but just stay with it and you'll get it. And like I said, we can usually do this one last. This kind of just sits up on top right here, and then that again plugs in to place right there. So that's good. So now everything's in. All the plugs look good. The board is sitting nice and level. If something's not sitting level, maybe in the corner or on the side, it's up, more than likely you have a cable underneath the board, and that's why it's not sitting flush. So could be a cable or a screw. Sometimes I've seen screws where they'll stick to a speaker or one of the magnets, and then you try to put it in and it doesn't fit right. So if it feels like you're trying to force it, it's probably something in the way. So anyways, so that's that. And then if any of your buttons have fallen out, your volume button or your power button, you can just put it right back into place. Now there's kind of two sides to the button, and one side is nice and straight and flush. Another side has a little notch, and you can't really see that. There you go, a little notch out of it. And you'll notice that on the frame down here, there's a notch, on either side. So you have the notch down there, and then kind of a long frame right there. So you just want to make sure that the side with the notch goes up, and that these two little guides on here, I don't know if you can see that, but it's almost a little square, and you'll have little corresponding guides on here. So lay it into place, and you'll put the little square on the guide right there, and then the other one right there, and then make sure that looks nice and straight. So as long as everything looks straight, the corners kind of round on the volume button, they round kind of as the same as the housing, then you know you've probably got this on the right way. If it doesn't, or it looks backwards or upside down, or you know that it doesn't look smooth, then you flip it around. So we'll put it back on. I typically start at the top of the phone, and you'll just want to make sure all those little guides we got off in the beginning, that you could hear them click, that you just click them all back into place. And you'll notice if it doesn't, if your volume button goes in like that, you can kind of see it. It's in. It probably fell off of the guide. So again, you'll have to pop this back off to make sure you get the volume button nice and straight. And I mean, sometimes this happens, you know, where you have to redo it again because your volume didn't line up right. So anyways, so we'll start at the top again. Click that. Okay, that's good. Now you just test each top and bottom. Make sure the volume up and down works. Okay. And then just continue around the frame. Remembering just to push on the edge. You don't want to push in the middle and try and squeeze it all together. You'll crack the LCD if you do that. So, so just pushing on the edge. Once it's good, you'll look, make sure it's all nice and flush. And once it's all flush, then you can put the screws back in. And the way that I'll put the screws in is I'll actually go opposite corners. And that way it you don't give too much pressure to one side as you're trying to reassemble the phone. Because you could probably put all the screws in here, and if something's not lining up right down here, when you go to put the screw in, you can damage part of the board or something. So let's kind of do it in a you almost think of it as like a star pattern, you know. I start kind of make a star. And another thing I'd recommend before you put all the screws in is, when you're testing the part, is to just save yourself some time and not having to put all these in if something doesn't work right, is to just put the frame on and then the battery and then test it. So if a plug is undone or something's not plugged in right or not lining up right, or maybe you have a defective part, you don't have to take all the screws back out in order to then take it apart to replace it again. So anyways, you want to put the battery in, usually top down just like that, and then the battery door as well. And I usually do the top two little pieces first, and then it's kind of tricky, but I'll bend it a little bit just to get those bottom ones in, and then slide the sides, and you should be good. But that's how you put the phone all back together.